Hello and welcome once again to the Progressions of Consciousness radio program. I'm your host, Keith David Henry, and you're on the Community Listening Network, www.clnradio.com. In the last few programs, I'd attempted to get back to the Progressions of Consciousness chart that is on my website, and I seem to be being moved in a different direction, and there seems to have been a series inserted into my best intent. And after reviewing the last two programs, I realized that what I've been talking about was the concept of the avatar. Now, people, especially kids that do a lot of, gaming on their computers, a lot of them are probably very familiar with the term avatar and what it means. Excuse me. And there are probably, many metaphysicists and, spiritists who also have their own view of what the word avatar means. So what I did was I went to dictionary.com and I looked it up, although I had an idea what it meant already. But for the listeners, this might be a point of enlightenment for you. Avatar, which is spelled A-V-A-T-A-R. So dictionary.com defines an avatar as a noun, and the first definition is Hindu mythology, the descent of a deity to the earth in an incarnate form or some manifest shape, the incarnation of a god. The second definition is an embodiment or personification as of a principle, attitude, or view of life. And the third one is computers, a graphical image that represents a person as on the internet. So an avatar is a virtual representation of some other ideal or entity. We've had, many discussions from, the physics standpoint about this physical reality and what it's all about. And I made in one program the assertion that what we esteem as physical reality is actually spirit. There is nothing substantive whatsoever about anything that we consider physical. I'm sitting in a chair, I'm talking into a microphone, I'm recording on a computer, but all of these so-called solid things are made up of 99.99999, with 100 nines, space, and 0.0000000 with 100 zeros or so, 1 energy. There's nothing material or physical about anything that we consider physical. And if someone were to ask me, well, what is the definition of something that is spirit? That's probably the definition I would give. Something that has no substance. It's airy. It's not physical. We have been conditioned to accept this physical reality as reality, when science has discovered that really it's illusion. It's non-substantive. There's nothing physical at all about physical reality. It's a misnomer. And others have called it a hologram or what have you. So someone might say, well, why is it that it feels solid? And to get into the physics of it, what's actually going on is when you touch something, you really never make contact with it. You never physically feel or touch it. What happens is the electromagnetic field that exists around the atoms that comprise your finger or your hands interacts with the electromagnetic field of the atoms that exist in the so-called material that you're coming into contact with, and those two electromagnetic fields repel each other, rendering the sensation of touch. So quite literally, you never come into physical contact with anything. You never touch anything. The electromagnetic fields interact and present the illusion of feeling or touch or contact. And that's very similar to the mechanism we mentioned several programs ago about the sense of sight. How the sense of sight is nothing more than a digitized version of what your eye has captured and stored in the optical centers of your brain, which is in the back of your brain. So quite literally, you never see anything. What you do is you process a digitized, electrical signal, and the reasoning capacities of your brain interpret what that thing is that you think that you saw. So in reality, you have no way of knowing what the quote-unquote outside world really looks like or is really made of, because all you have as a context is your brain interpreting the various stimuli that is captured by the five senses. So how is this relevant to the concept of the avatar? Well, as I've been building up to over several programs, this physical representation of ourselves, our body and our body senses and our ego and all of that, that's really an avatar. That's a virtual representation of the real us that exists in a realm that this physical being is not aware of. And when you start talking about perception and you start talking about the five senses, and I really like to deal with sight more than anything else, because it's certainly the most prominently used of our senses in many respects. But imagine, if you will, or try to conceive, if you will, that when you look at something or when you look in a certain direction, the light that is reflecting off of those things that you are quote-unquote looking at is collected by the eye and stored in the brain. But the only thing your brain sees is what you have context to describe. So what you're seeing, you think you look in front of you right now at this very second. Well, what you're seeing is the light that was reflected off of that object milliseconds ago. So you're not seeing in real time. You're seeing after the light has reflected off of it. You're not seeing in real time. After the light reflects off of it, is captured by the retina, is translated into electrical signal, sent to the optic center of your brain, interpreted by the reasoning capabilities of your brain. That's when you have seen. And that may only take milliseconds. But it's still not real time. You're still, what you think you're seeing now is old information. For instance, people look up at the sun and they say, well, look, isn't the sun bright today? But what you're actually seeing is the sun as it existed about 8 minutes ago, because it takes about 8 minutes for light to travel from the sun to the earth. So you're never seeing anything in real time. Now, I want to twist your brain a bit, because as I said a couple minutes ago, although your eye is taking in everything that the light is bouncing off of, It's not the eye that sees, it's the mind that sees. It's the perception that is at play. So all you actually see is what your perception allows you to see. The point I'm trying to make is that there may be, and more than likely are, many, many more things that exist in your surroundings than your perception will allow you to see. There are perhaps many, many more things that are happening around you than that your process of perception allows you to perceive. By the same token, there may be things that you are perceiving that are not at all what you think they are, because you're dependent upon that process of perception. So what is this stuff all about? And I recall my adolescent years and my post-adolescent years. I was very much into some of the video games, not the ones that are popular today, like the Doom and the Call of Duty, just the shooting games. I mean, I could play those for some time, but it got boring after a while, just shooting things and watching them explode. The types of games I liked were the strategy games, and not just strategy games, but games where essentially you built your own world, you built your own community, you created your own characters, and then you went out on a campaign to either beat the computer or to beat other human players that were in the game. But of course, a human person can't jump into the computer and participate in the game. So you create an avatar. You create a character or an entity, an electrical representation of you that is in the game, but you are controlling it. So we as a human species, and I dare say every sentient being, is really an avatar. We are source. We are source in its totality that is manifesting as an avatar, manifesting as a virtual representation of source in this video game we call the time-space continuum. Now, I talk a lot about religion, and somebody said, well, no, not you, Keith. Well, yeah, I do. And, some people may get tired of hearing about it, but, I'm going to keep talking about it because this is something that I believe that there are many people that want to hear it and need to hear it. And as I said before, there are many people that maybe they're turned off by it or don't want to hear it, that are very happy with their religion. And to you I say, carry on, my wayward son. I have no bone to pick about it. But for people that want to reach beyond the control systems of religion, understand what they are, and really understand what we're here for, I feel compelled to present this information. Now, I had a conversation with someone who I respect eminently in across the board, for just for their integrity, for their intelligence, and many other reasons. And we were having a conversation about the myth of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, be careful when I use the word myth there. I'm not talking about the lie of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's not what the word means. It just means a story. It's a story that has an underlying esoteric meaning. That's what myth means. And we were having this discussion about the myth of the death, the burial and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And we started talking about the dozens, literally dozens, of ancient and old religions that all have the same storyline. They all have a incarnate God that was born on the 25th of December, that had had 12 disciples, that started their ministry at 30, that was crucified, buried for 3 days, resurrected on the third day, ascended into heaven, and had various titles assigned to them, like the Christ, the Lamb of God, the Alpha and Omega, the Son of God, etc., etc. The thing to realize that each of these dozens of mythological religions all predate Christianity. So Christianity is the latest religion to adopt that, the whole death, burial, and resurrection idea and symbolism or symbology. But every other one of those, all, I think there's 30 or 40 or 50 of them, they all have the same theme. And we were talking about that, and he says, it seems to me that after doing a bit of research and excuse me, and letting information that I've gathered seep into my consciousness, that the death, burial, and resurrection scenario is really an allusion to astronomical events. So I thought I would talk a little bit about that in this program, but to continue with my story, he then asked me, well, do you know anywhere where I can, get this, some kind of empirical information on this where I could investigate it myself? And I almost fell out of my chair because I'm thinking, here I've written 3 books and I have a website with hundreds and hundreds of such references, and I've been talking about this for so long, and it made me realize that perhaps I haven't made people aware of what is on my website and what is the content of my books and why I feel so comfortable to speak so vehemently about religion. So I want to spend a bit of time talking about that. If you go to my website, www.don'treadthisbook.net, there's a link on there under the references section called The Origins of Christianity. Now, you gotta understand that I've spent thousands and thousands of hours researching and posting these references on my website. I don't just get on the radio and start blabbing, from, where the sun don't shine. I'm coming from a place of empirical research and the gathered work of a lot of people that are much smarter than I am, that have, categorized, cataloged, and given full references for the work that they have done. So when I boldly proclaim on an internet radio broadcast that the origins of Christianity are basically, so much folklore, and that the ideal of Christianity is for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is the element of control, and to bring about the idea of fear and obedience. And when I make such statements, if I made such statements without anything to back them, then, I could understand, somebody saying, hey, get off of it already. But, after talking to this gentleman, I realized that people must think I'm just kind of spouting some sort of, a personal vendetta against religion and Christianity, when that's not it at all. What I'm doing is reiterating the research of many, many people that have found that there's absolutely no basis whatever in historical documentation of any kind for the validity of Christianity, and that essentially it was created by the Catholic Church to consolidate Emperor Constantine's power across the world. That's a pretty heavy statement, isn't it? I mean, when you think you've got billions and billions of people, and certainly millions, for instance, every Sunday standing in church, raising their hands in worship to Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and not realizing that the idea of Jesus Christ as the Son of God did not even exist until after 300 AD. I mean, doesn't that at all make you wonder that, either I'm completely crazy or there has to be some basis to it? So many others, you don't want to mess with anyone's religion. You don't want to mess with anyone's faith. Well, I'm not too worried about that because, people that are devout Christians, back to the time that these events occurred and show them the invalidity of what they believe, and they'll still believe it. So I don't have any illusions that people who are, very staunch in their religion are going to all of a sudden say, oh, I've been wrong all these years. No, not at all. What this program is for, and what my books are for people that have said, hey, there is something wrong. I know there's something wrong, but I can't prove it. I need information. Those are the people I'm talking to. It would be sort of like, if I met a person who thought that, a grapefruit was God, and they created a whole religion around grapefruit being God. I mean, more power to you. I don't care if you want to worship a grapefruit, that's back. But if you want to experience a life and a lifestyle that is closer to what you're really, and to really understand more about your origins, where you came from, and what you're here for, in order to use that information and your enjoyment of this realm, then the more accurate information you have, the more value you can bring to that endeavor and to others who also want to participate in that same freedom and beauty. Now, let me hasten to add that I'm sure that there are many, many religionists who are ecstatic about their religion and are just, full of joy and faith and peace and love, etc., and perfectly content with their, well, once again, more power to you. I wouldn't think of, trying to dissuade you from that. But if you really want the information, and one of the things that I've done on my site to make it easier is, probably 99% of the references on my website are video feeds. You don't even have to read. You don't have to, a person might say, well, I don't have time to go looking here and there and studying here and there. And even if I did have the time, I'm not sure I would know what to look for or where to go. Well, that's what I'm here for, because I've already done all of that work for you. And you don't have to buy my books to benefit from my research. All you have to do is go to the websites. All the research is right there. You go to the website, you click on the link of interest, you click on the video, you put your feet up, you lean back, and you watch and listen. It's that simple. I was on, I was listening to, actually watching one of the videos on my site today about the Council of Nicaea, and one of those videos is on is on YouTube, and the pastor who gave the message was talking about where Jesus Christ as God, where the concept of Jesus Christ as God really came from. And once again, and do your research, don't take my word for it, the idea of Jesus Christ as God did not show itself anywhere until after 300 AD. Very important concept to grasp. And once again, you'll find all the references that you want. But on the site, on the YouTube site, they have an area where people can comment. And I was just watching the interplay between two people that had watched the video and were having a comment war, if you will. And it got very angry from the standpoint of one of the commenters, who obviously was an academic, who was obviously not a Christian, and the comments of the other person who was a Christian, going back and forth. And I noted that the final comment was just replete with frustration, because the person that was a Christian, everything they said and everything they did and everything they believed, well, their source of their belief and their comments was the Bible, which, according to Christianity, is the Holy Word of God. And once again, it was the Catholic Church that dubbed the Bible as the Holy Word of God. So, excuse me, I started to realize that, no matter what evidence is presented, when a person believes something, it's very difficult for them to just all of a sudden say, well, let me investigate what I believe. Most people don't investigate. Most people don't think critically. Most people take the traditions that were handed down to them, and they either run with them or they alter them in some way, so that they still maintain a certain level of comfort. And it is completely understandable. And for years, I've thought about why people do this. And, my mind goes back to the O.J. Simpson trial, where, they were interviewing Johnny Cochran after I don't know if this was in his closing argument or if it was in an interview. I don't recall it exactly. But they were talking about, the acquittal. And one of the analogies that Johnny Cochran used was, if you're eating a plate of spaghetti and you see a cockroach in it, you don't have to keep eating to wonder whether or not you're going to find another cockroach. The fact that there was one is enough to make you stop eating the spaghetti. Even if you killed that one and, cut off half the plate where that one was, the ideal is, there's a cockroach in it. And that's how most people's mental construct has been conditioned. So that, if I start looking at one area of my life that I hold as absolute truth and find it to be false, well, what does that mean? Well, what that means is now I'm in a position where I may have to challenge everything that I believe to be absolutely true and consider that everything I believe is false. That is a very, very heavy and sobering proposition. So what do people do to avoid facing that sort of proposition? They just take everything and put it in the same category. This is my truth. This is what I believe. And I don't care what the evidence says. I don't care if it's right or wrong. I don't care if it's true or false. I believe it, therefore it is true. And, I can't help but state very clearly that anyone who is a staunch believer in Christianity has done just that, because there's absolutely no evidence that Jesus even existed historically, much less than what the Bible teaches about him is true. And many said, well, he was a great teacher and he was this and that or the other. And frankly, I don't care one way or the other whether or not Jesus existed. I'm not here to bash Jesus. I'm sure he was a great guy. But I'm also not prepared to make a God out of someone that now I must bow down and worship, and who I must be subservient to, and who controls my thinking, what I do, what I say, and where I go. Now, that's just me. Some people enjoy that. Some people, and I'm not being facetious, don't misunderstand me. Some people need that kind of structure in their lives. You know, if you think about it, a vast majority of Christians got into Christianity because they were facing some overwhelming kind of problem in their life, so they turned to God, and Christianity was, you know, where they ended up, if you will, or their chosen way of life. You know, many Christians also, they inherited it from their parents, and so it's all they've ever known. But essentially, you know, the practice and belief of Christianity is, you know, largely held by people who enjoy the structure of it, who need the structure of it. It's much more convenient to have some external authority guiding your life than to take responsibility for your own life. And, you know, many of these things I know sound coarse, and I'd be very, very surprised if there weren't a bunch of people out there very angry at me right now saying, oh, I'd like to get my hands around his throat and just choke him, or I wish he would shut up about this. But you'll get your wish in relatively short order, because I don't intend to harp on this forever, but this is where I am right now. So on my website, www.don'treadthisbook.net, you'll find, among other very powerful links of references, a link called The Origins of Christianity. And the very first video explains the entire analogy of the birth, the death, and the resurrection of the Son of God. And it has nothing to do with original sin. It has nothing to do with a figure named Jesus who came to earth to die for the sins of the world. It has nothing to do with any idea of any separation between God and man, which is actually a nonsensical concept if you think about it. Because God is omniscient, omnipresent, God is everywhere. How can you be separate from God? So it explains in astrological terms why religion after religion after religion after religion, and myths from thousands and thousands and thousands of years, why do they all have a Savior, a Son of God that was born of a virgin, that was crucified or murdered in other ways, buried, and rose again the third day? Why do they all have this same theme? Why is it repeated throughout the religious and mythological world? Now, if you're really interested in the answer to that question, visit my site, don'treadthisbook.net. Click on the Origins of Christianity link, and the very first video that page opens to explains the entire thing. And there are several videos below that of theologians and historians that really expose to some great detail the inauthenticity of the Bible. And I know that's very difficult for people to hear. And when I say the inauthenticity, I don't mean that it is inauthentic as a writing that has spiritual significance, that has esoteric significance, that is valuable and has good information. What I'm talking about is this inauthenticity as the exclusive and inerrant Word of God. And when I think back to it and how there was a time when I believed that, even though I believed that, I always questioned, well, you know, how can the Word of God be in a book? I mean, that's a question I always had, but, you know, I never really, you know, openly questioned it or really asked the question. And, you know, the answer would be, well, my words are spirit and they are life. They're not written words, they're actually spirit, which was actually truer than the people who were answering me suspected. Let me just reintroduce myself. My name is Keith David Henry. This is the Progressions of Consciousness radio program, and you're on the Community Listening Network, www.clnradio.com. So, in summing all of this up and coming to the conclusions that, pretty much we've been flamboozled, we've been fooled, we've been lied to, and tricked about the nature of the Bible and of Christianity and of religion. So what's it all about? Why would anyone want to do that? And what is it that they don't want us to know? Why give us this elaborate, strange thing? Well, first of all, you've got to realize that it was a natural progression. It wasn't some mastermind that decided thousands of years ago, hey, let's come up with religion. It was basically a earth of people, a group of people in many different places that understood the value and the beauty and the power of the sun, although they had no context to put that into, so they thought the sun was God. And if you can just do a little extrapolation and see where I'm going with that. But that over time, it was that whole idea of respect for the sun and respect for God was commandeered by an unscrupulous group that I call the dark oligarchy, and used as a means of controlling us, of taking our power, and of making us subservient and making us used to the idea of obedience, subservience, and worship. I mean, God forbid that we should ever find out that we are, quote unquote, gods. As Jesus himself said, have not the scriptures said, ye are gods? God forbid that we should ever understand that we are in no way deficient in our relationship with the Creator, in our relationship with Source, that we are in no way separate from Source, that we are in no way beholden to an angry God for either sins that were created by Adam or so-called sins that we have committed. That we are in no way or in no shape or form being judged by the Creator or by God based upon, our actions, presuming that the Bible or any other, religious writing or holy writing or canon is the ultimate or exclusive text for how we should live upon this earth. God forbid that we should discover that we are autonomous and that we are sovereign as avatars of our higher self existing in this illusion of physical reality. God forbid we should ever discover that. God forbid that we should throw off the chains of control, mind control, spirit control, body control, this obsession with wealth and oppression. God forbid that we should shed the great fear associated with disobeying God. God forbid that we should ever realize that we are perfect, loved creations and manifestations of the Source, God, that are here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to experience this illusion. That's it. That's it. Ebony, that's all, folks. There's nothing more to it. When I say there's nothing more to it, I don't mean that there aren't higher and more transcendent truths that we learn and grow on. But in terms of our purpose, is our purpose to leave perfect oneness and connectedness with Source and Spirit, and to come to a place of relativity, of subjectivity, of illusion, and then to spend the totality of our lives and our efforts in trying to experience the spiritual unity and oneness with Source that we left to come here, to re-experience the thing that we left. Well, that's just kind of silly. If the purpose was to experience that unity and that oneness, in its consciousness, totality of consciousness, then there's no reason to come here, because that's an uphill climb here, if that's what you're trying to do. And the reason it's an uphill climb is because that's not what this place, what this reality was designed for. Okay, so we are a manifestation of Source. We're avatars. The part that says I am, the part that says me, the part that calls itself me or I, the perception. You've got the 5 physical senses, or maybe you've got 6 senses, or maybe you've got clairaudience or clairvoyance or clairsentience, or the other one, I can't remember the name of it. So, what is all of this stuff for? Well, it's to enhance the experience. Those, what you might call 6th senses, are trappings of our connectedness with Source, and that connectedness has been hijacked and has had religion superimposed upon it. I don't know how much plainer or clearer I can make it. So here you have, the New World Order and the Illuminati and the Bilderberg Group and, all of these hierarchical oligarchies that have given us religion and have given us the Bible and saying, well, this is your book. You listen to this one. And they're using the things that they're telling us not to use. They're using the esoteric. They're using astrology. They're using Wicca. They're using magic. They're using the power of the earth. They're using the power of the air. They're using the power of symbology and the ancient unseen powers of the universe to further their agenda, and they're giving us the Bible. Sort of like, you see these movies where, some great military force moves into a town to take over the town, and people come out with rocks and they're throwing them at the tanks. And the guys in the tanks are thinking, well, that's kind of cute. But they're not going to do any harm to the tanks with rocks. So why do you think religion, by and large, has treated as taboo these things that are attributed to Satan and evil and the devil? Why do you think we're being made to fear these types of things like crystals and tarot and Wicca and magic? Why? Well, because if we learn what they really are and we start using them, we're on equal footing with them. But what are we doing instead? We're buying guns. Well, guess what? They got a FEMA camp with your name on it. We're standing out in front of Bilderberg meetings with megaphones, screaming and hollering at them. Well, don't you realize what's going on there? What's going on is, by, some man ranting and raving about what's going on, you can funnel your own frustration and your own sense of indignation through him, and then you don't feel like you need to do anything. There's nothing substantive happening by, riots or by marching on Washington or by, gathering a militia to attack the New World Order. or by participating in the political system to, vote out the bad guys and put in the good guys, because I'm telling you right now, they're all in the pockets of the same people. I mean, you think about it. You think about, the presidential elections, and they have to publicize who contributes to their elections. And it's like, reading a comic book when you go through and you realize that both sides are being funded. They're getting political contributions from the exact same multinational corporations. It's ridiculous. It's laughable. And you have all these people saying, oh, well, the Democrats, they're the evil ones, and then you got the other people saying, oh, no, it's the Republicans, they're the evil ones. And don't you realize that they're all in the pockets of the same people? Can you be that naive to not realize that? But, nevertheless, these are the weapons we've been given to fight the tanks. We've been given the rocks of religion. We've been given the rocks of elections. We've been given the rocks of dissent. We've been given the rocks of revolution that are going to play exactly and directly into the hands of those that are propagating this big mess. Not the illusion. The illusion was here before they got here. They're just using it for their advantage. So what happens if we start using the same tools they're using? Well, the problem with them is they don't have any sense of connectedness to source. So if we start using those tools with a sense of connectedness with source, it's not going to take but so many of us to do that before the curtain around the Wizard of Oz is pulled back and we see the little man pulling the levers. And then what do you do? Kick them out? Well, good luck with that one. Once again, there's a FEMA camp with your name on it. So what do? We exercise our autonomy. We exercise our imagination and our individuality in our own lives. We are avatars. This body, this mind, this emotion, this is not the real me. I'm an avatar. The real me, the higher me, is experiencing this reality through that avatar. So realizing that, why are you so excited about what these guys are doing? Let them alone. Let them do their thing. But now you do yours. Just don't do it with the weapons that they have provided for you to use, as Michael Tsarian said. The secret and the key is that as you delve and move into your individual autonomy and your individual sovereignty, your individual imagination, your individual relationship and connectedness with source, as you solidify that, that which is around you begins to respond to that choice and that energy. Okay, I want everyone to get that. As you move into yourself as an individual, as your sense of responsibility moves internally toward self-responsibility, self-autonomy, self-creativity, as you move inward and realize that you are an avatar, and that source is expressing itself through this thing called the physical body, or the physical experience, or the life experience, or the third dimensional experience. As you make that move, things around you are automatically affected. You can't help it. I got news for you, folks. This planet, this reality was designed to react to that dynamic. That's why external things don't affect it. That's why external moves are not lasting, and it requires a great deal of energy to bring. I mean, revolution, you think about how much time, effort, work, and human life went into creating the American Revolution. Yet, how effective was it? We're perhaps worse off now than we were as colonists of England. the exact same circumstances that existed in England exist now. Taxation without representation, a fiat currency that is not based on any value. It's called the dollar. We're not on any gold standard. And, subservience to the crown, if you will, or to the rule of government. We're slaves. We're servants. What the founding fathers had in mind was that the government was servant to the people, but that's certainly not the case today. So look at it. We're right back where we were before. And somebody said, well, it did last a long time. What, 200 years? In the face of hundreds of thousands here on Earth and billions in the universe? That's a drop in the bucket. It's like, you do one of those quick fixes on your car, and it goes a mile and then breaks. Well, what you need to do is replace the part. A quick fix isn't going to work. So, all of these external things that we have been given by the dark oligarchy as a means of pleading our case, as a means of changing things, is nothing more than control mechanism to keep us from realizing who we are as avatars, as manifestations of source in this realm. Once again, you're listening to the Progressions of Consciousness radio program. My name is Keith David Henry, and we're on the Community Listening Network. Once again, in light of my conversation that I just recently had with the gentleman, I want to reiterate what is on my website. It's www.don'treadthisbook.net, and on my website you will find very, very sound references for everything I've said on this radio program and everything I've said in my books. And I challenge anyone to visit that site, especially if you disagree with what I have to say about various things. I challenge anyone to visit that site, really look at the references, and refute them. I'll put you on the air. I promise. I'll put you on the air with your objections to what I'm saying, as long as you have, valid basis for it and not just your religious belief. I'll put you on the air. Well, the reason I know that's not going to happen is because there are hundreds and hundreds of references from different sources that are all saying the same thing. I like to have basis for what I believe, and I'm certain that, just like most other people in the world, that there are many things that I believe that have no basis. But if I find out about it, if it's brought to my attention, I will investigate it. And as I've said in my book, many people, my first book, Don't Read This Book If You're Right, many people, when they hear new information, they're afraid to investigate it. Well, I'm just the inverse of that. I'm afraid not to investigate it. If I hear something new, I want to know where they got it from, where it's coming from. Is it accurate? And most people aren't researchers. Most people by nature do not have a propensity toward research because they're busy with their lives. They're busy doing other things. And that's why there are people like me, and if I may be presumptuous enough to put myself in the category of researchers like Tsarian and Tellinger and Mattson and the Purifories, who delve in deeply into information and research it. That's what we're here for. We're here to make it easy for you. You might want to say, we're here so that you have no excuse. You can't say, well, I didn't know, or I didn't hear about it, or I didn't know where to look, or I didn't have the information. Because we do know where to look, we do have the information, and we have the desire and the propensity toward research. And we do all this work, and we provide it for you freely. I mean, Michael Tsarian, he puts his references on his website. I mean, his book, you're obviously not going to get as much simply by reading the references as you will by reading his books, but the references are there. They're free. Michael Tellinger's got a free newsletter that he puts out. And sure, just like anyone else, this is their profession, so certainly they need to be able to sell the fruits of their labor for profit. But I'm convinced, in the case of everyone that I've just mentioned, that our main goal is to get the information out. And why should we not be paid for that? So sure, I would love people to buy my books, but I'm not going to withhold valuable information just because people don't want to buy the book. But I will say that you'll get much more by reading the books, because just by looking at the references, you have no idea where I'm going. You have no idea what the true message of the books are. All you have is a bunch of references that you have to put together and try to figure out what my point of view is. So you're not going to get my point of view by looking at the references on the websites. You're only going to get the references. If you want the point of view, you're going to have to buy the books. And those books, again, are available on www.don'treadthisbook.net. And my first book is Don't Read This Book If You're Right. The second book is The Invisible World and Other Obvious Things. And the third book is Terra, Terra, Return of the Divine Feminine. So in closing, let me just say how incredulous it is to watch a person in an interaction of ideas to take a book like the Bible or the Quran or any other holy writing you want to attribute your religious fervor to, and to quote from that as if it is fact in an argument of apologetics is so ludicrous that I probably wouldn't even mention it if it weren't for the fact that I myself was in that place at some point. And it's very difficult for me to understand how I could have been in that place. I mean, I understand it academically, but it's very difficult for me to understand how I allowed myself to be in that place until you realize that that is how the human mind works, and that is how this realm was designed to work. This realm is a realm of illusion. And the dark oligarchy is using the properties of this realm to essentially create a slave race. Now, you might not have visible chains on, but the chains are psychic chains. They're chains of control. They're chains that make it so that you're very predictable. We always know how you're going to act and how you're going to respond. And fear is the catalyst. Fear is the magic weapon. So I hope you've enjoyed the program. I look forward to seeing you next week. This is the Progressions of Consciousness program on the Community Listening Network. I'm Keith David Henry. I'll see you next time.